We've heard about change and how that's being pushed from the inside, but we can't forget the role of people. As much as we love the role of people in organizations, we also cannot forget the role of governments, the role of finance, and the role of large companies. So we're going to turn now to a conversation about systems and the systems that hold the power. The business, the finance, the institutions, where the ambition really can meet delivery. What are these people doing? So we're going to talk about what's helping climate action right now and how we move to build ideas that are not just short-term ideas, but long-term ideas of legacy. So for this discussion, please joining me on the stage, we will have the CEO of Beko Corporate, Hakan Beluga. We'll have a business leader, campaigner, and co-author of Net Positive, Paul Pullman. Co-founder of Change Now, Kevin Tayabali, and Deputy CEO of l'Agence Française de Développement, Marie-Hélène Louison. Please welcome all four of them to the stage.
Hi.
Hello.
Left hand, sorry.
It's okay.
How are you?
Hi, how are you? Hello. Good to see you again.
How are you doing?
Wonderful. Welcome to the stage. Now, aren't we in for a bit of a conversation here? I'm going to start by pretty much jumping straight into it. We're leading through a time of turbulence. There's probably no point pretending that the world is we've had some big changes of late, and we're living through a moment in economic strain, political backsliding, climate urgency. And in this landscape, what helps our leaders, the main leaders, to actually stay the course rather than jump off it? Paul, I'm actually going to start with you on this one.
So I'll give you a very simple answer. I call it the ABCs of leadership right now. The A stands for being adaptive. Understand what is happening in this world, what is changing, why so many governments got voted out of office, what the other 50% is really concerned about. Adaptive leader. Understand what world you live in. Some are a little bit aloof on both sides of the equation. The B stands for bridging. When you get half the population voting for someone else, don't condemn them. Try to understand what makes them tick. What you find is that many of the values are actually the same. They all want their children to do better. They want a better future. They want air they can breathe. Find these common grounds and work with people. I spent a week in Washington to try to understand the other side. It's not easy, but there are many things we can work together. And the C is, in fact, the collaboration. We need to move away from this mindset of competitive leadership to collaborative leadership. Within all of that, don't lose your values, your purpose, keep focused on the long term, build your own resilience, and obviously walk the talk. Nothing better than showing that there is enough technology out there, business models and other things, to show that this makes sense. The direction we go is undeniable. The question is, how fast do we go?
ABCs of leadership.
ABC.
Hakan, I'm going to have to jump to you. I mean, you're CEO of Beko. How are you guys sticking it out in times where it gets difficult? What are you thinking? What makes your leadership different?
Yeah. Well, I mean, consistency, I guess. If you start reading the news and changing and shifting your strategy, you won't go very far. Unfortunately, the direction we're going as a world is very clear. Diana shared the data. We all look at labels, dates, but actually we're falling far behind in terms of action. What that means is the consequences are very real and felt by consumers everywhere. So they are increasingly likely to choose companies who are doing the right thing over the long term. I really believe sustainability is, just so people understand what we do, we manufacture appliances, and we've been focused on sustainability for many, many years now. We've led the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for 6 years. We do this because we think it's a long-term survival strategy. If you don't decarbonize today, if you don't make your appliances more efficient today, in the future you'll be penalized for it. And Just to tell you why that's significant, appliances consume roughly a third of the power a home consumes and is responsible for 15% of emissions. As Paul said, technology exists today to cut that by 50% roughly. And it's mostly regulation dependent. But if you wait for regulations, you'll fall behind. And as a company or as a leader, what we've tried to do, and I use leader in a more loosely defined term because it's always a team, but as a leader of industry, what we've tried to do is voluntarily shift the goalpost and really track the results as opposed to targets and goals and arbitrary dates. I wear this pin 1.5 degrees because abandoning that target, I think, is absolutely insane. Going, say, okay, well, let's change it to 2, then let's change it to 2.5. The Paris Agreement was there for a reason. It set out the goal for a reason. And we're approaching a point of no return. So this is actually when leadership really counts. And I think people really are looking up to that kind of leadership, which is sustainable, long-term, consistent, and honest.
Sustainable, long-term, consistent, and honest. And I love what you said about it's leading differently. It's not the same sort of leadership that we've seen before. Kevin, at Change Now, you've been convening a number of leaders for years. And what have you seen in terms of the way that leaders need to lead nowadays?
Well, I think, coming back to your question, how do you make the leaders stay the course? I think the first thing that they should do is come here. Right, look at it. There's 10,000 companies, 2,000 leaders that are coming here, and what they see is that, the transition, that's the main stage. That is not a side play, it's the main stage. And that's the reason why we're doing what we're doing. Don't listen to what you hear in the media. Come here and you see all the people, all the amazing leaders like Hakan, like Marielle, and like Paul, that are, walking the walk. And I think that's the best way to stay the course for them, is actually to see that they're not alone in this fight. Because, you've no idea how many CEOs have told me in the past, Kevin, what can I do? I'm against the system. There's backlash, there is the regulatory backlash, there is economic turbulence, rising tensions. It's tough. But then what you need is to give them agency, to make their voices heard. You need to create a support system for them, to find all the partners that will help them achieve their vision. And that's what we're trying to do with Change Now, to make them more powerful. But the truth is, I was at Davos in January, and the truth is those leaders, they are still a very small minority of people. And there's a big minority, there's a big silent majority that we need to make to help shifting. And to do that, you don't have that many levers. The main one is regulation, but as we know, regulation right now is not helping too much. Then when you look at behavioral science, the two main levers are A, peer pressure. Look at what the other leaders are doing, their successes, their leadership. Bringing the kids, bringing the family, because the kids, when they step up, then the parents, the leaders, they also do it. So that's why we have programs for leaders and their kids on Saturday. And then, financial incentives as well, like remuneration. And that's why we have a program for board members tomorrow. We're bringing 400 board members tomorrow morning, and we're putting them in a room. I'm losing my sheet. We're putting 400 board members tomorrow from 20 countries in a room, and we're going to make them work.
So we need
and I think that's how you make them understand that they need to stay the course. Hakan said it. It's about consistency. You can't keep shifting your mindset because you're going to lose your talents. You're going to lose credibility with your customers. Like there's this company that just like a few months ago, I'm not going to name it, in consulting, that they decided to stop their gender policy, where they've lost a lot of clients. That's how it works.
We can't just make the decision and then when the wind changes with it. Actually, we need to have spaces where we remain consistent. You mentioned a lot about systems, and we talk a lot about climate goals in particular. And real progress comes when it's part of how we work, not just a general goal that we've put out there. What helps climate action become part of the system, not just a statement? Marie, can you maybe jump in on that one? What do we need to do about this system so we're not just making statements, but it's actually something that's now embedded?
Yes, thank you for this question. And I think the most important thing that we have to remember is that, in fact, climate action is not a separate, isolated goal. And in fact, what we would like to, what we always remind is everything is in fact interconnected, and that was really the idea of, of the SDGs, to say that everything is interconnected. So today, when some people or governments say, okay, well, the main thing we need to focus is growth and job creation, and not so much climate change. But no, these things are totally linked, and we see that in countries where climate change is going to happen, this will do a lot of damage in terms of growth and job creation. Some studies have shown that for every 0.1 degree of global warming, you can lose as much as 1.2% of GDP. So this is why we always connect climate strategy and social inclusion strategy. Now, this will require, as you said, systemic change and big transformation. And the key thing is, how do we make this transformation possible? And I think here there are two key notions that are important. The first one is desire. And I think one of our failures is to make this future not only accepted but also desired, and maybe what we need to do is to promote a new model and to explain why this is the future we want. And sometimes, the debate focuses more on, when we need more taxes and less of this and less of that, but we need to be positive about this. The second notion is fairness. And I think, we had this example of France of the Yellow Vest, which happened because the changes that were proposed were perceived as not being fair. Another example is the just energy transition happening in some countries, and for example in South Africa, where the government has made this the main goal of this policy. And the idea is really, okay, the country needs to be less dependent on coal-based energy, but then what will happen to the communities in Mapulanga, because they depend on coal mining and coal production. So the government is focusing with the help of international financing institutions, and how they will create new job opportunities, train people, provide social protection, so that here again the citizens need to be convinced that this will benefit them, or that the burden will be equally shared.
I love that, the fairness that sits underneath the system, not just thinking about a goal, but if we're going to bring people along with us, then everybody has to be able to benefit from it, not just one person. Hakan, I'm really interested from your perspective when it comes to having an organization in a space where we've got turbulent times, and you're trying to create a system where you don't just drop sustainability when it becomes difficult, when it's less convenient, when it's not a hot topic. How have you built sustainability into a company like Beko?
Yeah, I'll try and be really brief. Most companies try to rejig the businesses by putting sustainability around the business model. And that doesn't always work, because you're fundamentally trying to do the same thing in a different way. But if you put sustainability in the center and say, okay, as an industry, this is our role we can play. And I truly believe that if you listen to what Diane said earlier, the only way we are going to get anywhere in this battle is by reducing the energy we consume, not just changing the mix. We really have to cut down on consumption. And we have a central responsibility there. So if you make that your core mission and then put the business model around that, then you're playing a completely different game than your competitors are. And that result is self-fulfilling. If it works, and in our case it clearly has, we are now the world's second, Europe's largest appliance manufacturer. I credit our sustainability leadership in a very large part for that leadership. Then the company becomes a purposeful business. And Paul, of course, is a mentor in this. He knows far more than I do. But once people believe that what you are trying to do is real, and you are not just reporting something because regulators require you to do so, or the financial markets force you to do an ESG score. Nobody cares about the planet does not care about your ESG score. And the planet is not something you can negotiate with. So only action, meaningful action, that drives results is believable. And if you get to that believable solution, if your teams, we have 55,000 employees around the world, they believe this to be their core mission. And once you get there, then it's self-fulfilling.
Believable action. When you make sustainability the core, so the business is operating around sustainability. We've touched on it a little bit, but I want to dive in a lot deeper around financing, because it's all well and good saying we're going to do all of these things, but it normally takes a degree of money to be behind doing them. So the ambition is there, but some would argue the money doesn't follow the ambition quickly enough. We have all of these big ideas and not enough finance behind it. Paul, what do you think needs to shift structurally or politically to unlock the kind of climate finance that the urgency demands right now?
Yeah, I first want to come back to Hakan for a second. He's written a very interesting book, A Mountain to Climb. He gave me it before it was published, so I read it a long time ago. But it's really how you integrate that, and he's a wonderful example of that, how you make it the core of the business model. So to embed it, it's not different for finance, by the way, but to embed it, you need to work at 3 levels. You need to work at your own level and become the moral leader that we're needing. Today, we're short of those leaders. We really see a behavior where people overnight, because of an election, switch their opinion by 180 degrees. It's hard to understand. So how do you keep your own purpose, your own values, and be true to that? The second thing is businesses need to not only put it at the core of their business, but start to think in a regenerative way. We've overshot the planetary boundaries. If we don't start to think in repairing, restoring, like Hakan was saying, we won't get there. And the third thing, unfortunately, but very powerful, is we're so far along the line on tackling this issue that it's difficult to do alone. So we need to form these partnerships. I think the real answers to drive that system change is in partnership. Coming to the financial market, money is flowing. Don't let people tell you a different story. It's just not flowing fast enough. But we have over $2 trillion in green energy. 90% of the expansions was in green energy. The bulk of the financial market are pension funds. They want good returns for people to retire, but they also want to be sure that the world is there to retire in, and they understand that. The good thing is that so much money is now concentrated. You take the BlackRocks, the State Streets, the Japanese pension funds, the Norwegian pension funds, and the list goes on. These people have sometimes $10, $12 trillion under management. The best way for them to get returns is for societies to function. And they're actually your best allies. They're not as short-term as people may want to tell you. But you have to go to them with a value creation story, not a greenwashing story, and certainly also not a green hushing story. The second thing to unlock financing is clarity on policy. The big thing that happened in Paris, and you've heard the previous panels talk about their interpretation, but actually the big thing that happened was the countries in the world said this is where we're going. And it's that certainty of direction that is now being confused in the United States, actually, with tariff on, tariff off, tariff on, tariff off. So that certainty of direction unlocks investments. Finance works on 2 things. They work on return, obviously, and risk. So giving a clarity of direction takes care of the risk part. Where the financial world falls short is they underestimate the speed with which technology curves are making the cost curves come down. And they also underestimate the cost that we will be having in the future by not acting. This is an exponential problem, and we're trying to solve this linear. So that doesn't work. We need to bring that exponential thinking in our actions, in our understanding of technology, and actually discounting future cash flows at a different rate than currently is happening. A lot of financing will be unlocked. We are focusing on impact. We've set up about $12 billion of impact funds. They're actually outperforming the rest of the portfolios in many of these private equity companies that we work with. So it is a very investable area, and it's an area certainly you can see higher returns than in the old brown economy, not surprisingly.
Kevin, I could see you over there. Oh, go on, yeah. I'm going to let you clap. I'll let you clap. Kevin, I could see you over there profusely nodding your head. As soon as I,
it's so difficult to speak after Paul. But I mean, I agree with everything. I mean, I think it's not just a trend. It's I mean, there is capital definitely, and it's a long-term shift that's happening. Investors they understand that it's real, and it's look. It's not a challenge of a lack of capital. It's more about a challenge of sending a signal. I'm going to give you an example. Like last week, there was for the first time a global agreement on carbon price on maritime shipping emissions. That's huge because in 2028, what's going to happen is that the vessels that exceed the threshold limits will have to pay some fines, and that money will help fund innovation. Basically, what's going to happen is that this is sending a signal to investors to invest massively into innovation to make maritime sector shift. So they're going to invest in green hydrogen, in wind mobility and things like that. So that's the kind of agreements that really allow for investors as well to throw capital into a sector, because now they will have to make that move. But again, I mean, agreeing with this, the capital is there, and it's really going in the direction. We're welcoming thousands of investors at Change now. There's so many of them, so many philanthropists, so many impact investors, so many traditional investors that are investing in clean energy, in decarbonation of transport, of mobility, of real estate, smart grid, and everything. I mean, that's really the future, and this is not stopping because of some political noise that we can hear in the media right now.
Do you know what? I'm loving that it's not as bad as we thought. Maria, I can see you've got something quickly that you wanted to add on to that.
Yes, maybe building on what Paul said, because I totally agree. In fact, there is a lot of liquidity in the markets, and so the challenge is more, how do we mobilize this liquidity, and how do we direct financing flows towards the right targets? And that was really one of the main objectives of the Paris Agreement, with an article calling for parties to align financing flows with the low carbon and resilient development. And what was really innovative, and you talked about how can we stay the course, but it did provide a long-term horizon for all leaders, not only state leaders, governments, but also corporates and banks, to set their own trajectories towards this 2050 goal. And it's interesting to see that although the Paris Agreement was non-binding, in fact, so many leaders choose to set their own targets and trajectories. And for public development banks, that provided us with the basis to support country strategies towards this goal. So you were talking about systemic change, and what is interesting also for us is to hear our clients, because a few years ago, and now every other year, we do a client satisfaction survey. And what we noticed was that our client was asking us to go beyond supporting their projects or investments, but really support their strategies of transformation. And so what we're doing more and more is, in fact, to provide finance that supports actors rather than investments, and with triggers based on results. And another important thing for public development banks to do is mobilize also this finance that exists in large numbers. And so this is done through innovative financing instruments, but also through working on policies and environments, because you said, okay, what drives private investments is returns, and it's also certainty and risk. And I think what we can do is also make sure that business environments and regulations is right. An important thing that did happen in Europe over the last few years, someone mentioned, well, regulation can do everything, of course, but one very important thing that happened in Europe over the last few years is regulation requiring financial institutions to assess climate risk, meaning that climate change is becoming a systemic risk for regulatory institutions. So now every financial institution in Europe has to measure physical and transition risk, and I think that's a big systemic change.
Fantastic. Do you know what? We can only really scratch the surface of this dialogue in the time that we've got, and I really wish that we could go deeper. I'm gonna cheekily end with one last question, and that's gonna give you, you've got like a sentence to answer it in. If there was one mindset or habit or narrative that we need to let go of to be more effective in the next decade, just one, and you've got a sentence each before somebody comes and drags me off this stage. Hakan, I'm going to let you go first.
We have to really stop talking about what may happen, what could happen, and really focus on the data. What is happening now, and act accordingly.
Focus on the data and act accordingly. Marie-Hélène?
I think what we need to do is fight fatalism, and we need to be convinced that change is possible, that we're capable to trigger change.
We're capable of triggering change. Paul?
Yeah, I actually agree. There's a feeling of powerless, of fear out there, and these are reactions, and that's not a good situation to be in. It doesn't lead to anything. So you have to muster that individual and collective courage, which is action. So we can choose what side we want to be. And if you want to be on the side of justice, in side of doing what is right for future generations, etc., it has to lead to courage. It's individuals ultimately that make the difference.
We've got to have courage because it's individuals that make the difference. And finally, Kevin?
I would say ego-driven leadership. China is the fourth company I've built, and I've learned over time that leadership shouldn't be about control. In too many places, leadership means giving orders, taking the decisions, taking charge. But in reality, what people follow is not instructions. They follow intent. So leaders should give intent and not instructions. Why? Because that's when you invite your team to think, to question, and to take ownership. And when people feel that they are trusted, that's when they feel that their decisions matter. And that's when they don't just follow you, they grow. And what we need right now, it's a world where it's not more leaders that attract followers, it's actually leaders that create more leaders. And I really think that right now, what we need, it's not about taking more space, it's about transmitting. So that's what I would say about what we need right now.
It's the intent behind the leaders. Thank you all so much for your time. And my name is Lavalda Vincenzi. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next session. Take care.